Shalom. We are going to continue studying the parables of Yeshua as much as possible within their first century context and try to understand them within that context. We have done several of these parables and they can be found in YouTube or through our Netivia webpage, which is www.netivia.org, and Netivia is spelled N-E-T-I-V-Y-A-H. So you're invited to see more of these short teachings on the parables of Yeshua, taken from a Jewish first century perspective, as much as we can do that with the materials that we have at our disposal. Today we want to approach a parable that is quite difficult for people to understand, simply because it deals with topics that are kind of uncomfortable for most people in Western civilization. And that's called the parable of the unjust steward. And of course, we are calling him the unjust steward because it seemed to us that what he did was unjust. However, we need to look at these parables within the political and sociological and spiritual condition of the people of Israel in the land of Israel and in the time of Yeshua. And this parable is different because it doesn't start like all the parables or most of the parables of Yeshua, which start the kingdom of heaven is like unto, or the kingdom of God is like unto. In this case, this is how the parable reads from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 16, verse 1. He said also to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a steward, and accusation was brought to him that this man was wasting his goods. So he called him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Give an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be steward. Then the steward said to himself, what shall I do? For my master is taking the stewardship away from me. I cannot dig. I am not ashamed to beg. I have resolved what to do, that when I am put out of the stewardship, they may receive me into their houses. So he called every one of the master's debtors to him, and said to the first, how much do you owe my master? And he said, 100 measures of oil. So he said to him, take your bill and sit down quickly and write 50. Then he said to another, how much do you owe? So he said, 100 measures of wheat. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. So the master commended the unjust steward because he had dealt shrewdly. For the sons of this world are more shrewd in their generation than the sons of light. And I say to you, make friends for yourselves by the unrighteous mammon, that when you fail, they may receive you into the everlasting home. He who is faithful in what is least is faithful also in much. And he who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, who will commit to you the trust of true riches? I'm going to stop the reading here, and I am going to enter into this parable. Like I said in the beginning, first of all, there is no opening statement, the kingdom of heaven is like unto. So obviously he's not talking about the kingdom of heaven in this parable. He's talking about something else. When I see the same type of parables and the same type of teaching in rabbinical Jewish writings from the 1st to the 3rd century, I see that the context is taken from the story of Joseph. Joseph actually is called the steward. The Greek word for the word steward is oikomenon. Oikomenon, we get the word economy from that word. Economy comes from the Greek word oikomenon, which means somebody in charge of the economy of the house, the bookkeeper, or the CPA if you wish, the accountant of the house that is managing the wealth of the master. So the word steward here is oikomenon, the same as the title that Joseph had over the house of Potiphar and then over all the wealth of Egypt. And I think that this is significant because what did Joseph do? Joseph managed the wealth of the wicked, so to speak, of the Egyptian idolaters, of Pharaoh and his domain, in order to be able to feed his brothers and sisters. Providentially, that's what happened. The ones that hated him, that spoke against him, that wanted to kill him, that wanted to sell him as slave, ended coming to him in the end to receive sustenance, food, so that they will not starve in the land of Canaan during the time of the drought. So Joseph is that steward that is over the mammon of the wicked, the mammon of the unjust, unrighteous. And he is supposed to manage the mammon of the wicked, the money, the wealth of the wicked, in order to become a blessing to Israel, to provide a house for Israel. So in this sense, the unjust steward is very much like Joseph in some respect. But what was the political climate in which this parable is being said? The political climate of this parable is that Israel is under Roman occupation and the house of Herod is in charge of administrating the desire and the will of the Romans, and the believers, the Israelites, the Jews, the simple people of the land are under great debt from the tax collectors and from the political pressure that was being applied by Rome on the land of Israel. And in that context, Rome is not interested in the support and in the steward himself. It's interested only in what the steward can do for the master.